Hey YouTube, I just wanted to make this video kind of showcasing my vinyl collection. I have a few records here, nothing tremendous. I'm actually looking down at them right now, that's why I'm not looking at the frame. I don't have a tremendous collection, I would call it a humble collection, but I have collected a few records over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of my life, and I've been noticing more and more people kind of putting up their collections on YouTube. It seems to have kind of supplanted the DVD collection videos, which is what I normally did on this channel, or what I used to do on this channel. The more I've seen these kind of vinyl videos and sort of the recommendations that's been put out there, and you know, sort of just the regional specificity of what areas of the country you can find different kinds of stuff, the more interested I've been in participating in what is being called on YouTube, I suppose, as the vinyl community. So a little bit of preamble before I get right into it. Obviously, I haven't made a video in a very long time. I think this is the first video where I've actually spoken into a camera in 2 years, year and a half. Probably closer to 2 to 3 years. I've posted, I do a podcast every week called The Jabber and the Drone. It's a movie review podcast that I do with my co-host Richard Wally, and I post, every once in a while I'll post just a clip or a chunk of that or a single review, you know, just audio with some pictures on it, and I've put that on the channel to kind of keep it alive, even though I haven't really even done that in probably about a year. But I wanted to kind of come back to YouTube and find a good excuse to do it, and I thought this is as good of an excuse as any. So my subscribers who are normally used to watching me talk about movies, I understand if you have no interest in this, and you have no interest in the subject of this video, and you know, you are welcome not to watch. I hope that I can gain new subscribers with this content, as well as maintain the subscribers I have with DVD reviews, DVD collection videos, that kind of stuff. I do want to start getting back into it more regularly. So if this video does well, and you know, old subscribers have anything to say about this video down here in the comments section, or you know, just let me know that you're still there, that you're still watching, I will continue to do the DVD videos as well. But let's get into it. Let's get into my vinyl collection. So this video, I'm gonna break it up a little bit. I'm gonna have to do more than one. Like I said, I don't have a huge collection, but it's big enough that, you know, I don't want videos to go on for too long. But I've been talking to a few people out there in the YouTube vinyl community, and there's a guy out there who I watch his videos pretty regularly called Working Class Wax. And if you haven't checked out his videos, you should. I'll put a link. He kind of, you know, being a fan of punk and hardcore and, you know, kind of obscure retro 80s indie rock and new wave and that kind of music, all the stuff sort of under the punk sphere, I've noticed that there's a lot of people out there doing videos about their record collection, but there's not a lot of people out there showing off punk, and he kind of made a whole video about it and talked about people who do show it kind of talk about it like they've grown out of it, or they kind of feel ashamed or sort of guilty pleasure that they show it, and you know, he says kind of a bummer, and I agree with him. So you know, my stuff here isn't like super rare, it isn't like you know, whatever, but I just wanted to add to the little bit that there is out there of videos showcasing punk rock vinyl, and I'll be doing that through my record collection first before I get into the other stuff. Okay, so here we go. The first record I'm going to show is Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols, classic punk record. I believe this is probably a repress. I don't think this is you know, an original pressing from 1977, but wouldn't matter if it was, because as you can see, it is torn to shreds. It looks as if a dog got to it. This is an early record in my record collection. I bought this from a record store that was going out of business in my hometown in Idaho, and I bought it for $3, which actually probably too much money for as bad of condition as this cover, and I think one side of the vinyl is pretty destroyed as well. But it's Never Mind the Bollocks, and you know, it plays. I can put it on the record player and it will play. It's just not the cleanest sounding record out there. And it's great to have in your collection. Surely I'll upgrade once I can find a good early pressing that's for a good price. This is a newer purchase. Not newer in chronologically, but a newer for me. And that is the Dictators' second album, Blood Brothers. And in case you don't know, wow, I've never done a vinyl video before, so I'm finding that it is difficult to fit both your face and the record in the frame. In case you don't know, the Dictators were a New York sort of proto-punk garage rock band, sort of around the same time as the New York Dolls. I would say they're sort of contemporaries of the New York Dolls. They played on through the 70s, but they're kind of a pre-Ramones style New York garage rock band, and they played at CBGBs and all that stuff. Dick Manitoba was their lead singer, and he's still sort of a prominent figure within the New York punk rock scene. You'll often see him in like documentaries and that kind of stuff, sort of speaking on behalf of New York. And this is fun. I believe the first record, the Dictators Go Girl Crazy, is the more sought after record. It's kind of a classic, and it's, you know, seen as sort of a landmark. The second record, which was released in 77 or 78, is not as sought after and not as talked about, sort of because their sound by this point was already sort of dated to a certain extent. Then, you know, punk rock had happened, punk rock proper had kind of happened and sort of supplanted the proto-punk garage rock sound. But this is a fun record. It's kind of fun, you know, bar rock, if you will. Alright, and now we're kind of getting into post-punk. A lot of this is going to be primarily sort of post-punk. One, because, you know, first-generation punk rock is difficult to find in original pressings or early pressings. And two, because personally I'm just more interested in sort of the post-punk style and sound. This is a landmark record. This is the first Public Image Ltd. Record, and this is the band that John Lydon, or Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, this was the band that he started after the Sex Pistols broke up. They were around a lot longer than the Sex Pistols. I think the Sex Pistols pretty much, you know, 76 to about 78, and then they were done. They only released one record and a few singles. This band continued on all throughout the 80s, maybe even up into the early 90s. This is their first record, and I believe this came out in 79. 78. And this is kind of seen as one of the first major albums of the post-punk movement. It's a little bit more musical than the Sex Pistols, a little less bratty. John Lydon's voice is still very recognizable. He sings like Johnny Rotten. But it's not just 3-chord in-your-face punk rock. It's a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more moody. Here's a Public Image Ltd. Single that I bought. I think when I bought this, I thought it was a full record because I wasn't as familiar with 12-inch singles. And I didn't look into it too much when I bought it, but the song is called Disappointed on side A, and then I think there's a remix on side B, and this came out in 1989, so there you go. Alright. This is one of my favorite records that I've ever bought. I've bought a lot of records, and I've tried to play them and try to at least get a sense of what they sound like on a record player and test the wax, as it were. But this record I actually will put on multiple times and really sort of enjoy it every time. This is one of my favorite purchases I've ever made, and this is the Specials' first album. The Specials were an English sort of post-punk early ska band. band, two-tone ska, and there they are in all their black and white suits and ties, looking like the Reservoir Dogs. And this is just a great record, really catchy. There's about 5 or 6 standout songs on here. I think I was first kind of introduced to this band through the movie SLC Punk, and I didn't realize how many songs they actually used off this record in that movie. I think they used like 3 or more. But this is all the way through, front and back, a great record, and just really enjoyable and kind of easy to listen to. I use the word punk, and I think some people think aggressive. I would actually recommend this music to just about anybody, because I think it's just a great record. Some more ska. I have Madness, their first record. This has their well-known song One Step Beyond, which is kind of an instrumental, sort of ska/surf punk kind of thing. And they were, along with the Specials and the English Beat, one of the better-known ska bands to come out of the two-tone style in England in the late 70s, early 80s. Would go on to inspire, all that SoCal, Operation Ivy type stuff. And this is a great record too. I like the Specials a little bit more as a band. This is heading a little bit more into the new wave territory, but this is still a really good album. And I also have their second record. This came out in 1980. I believe the other one was probably around 78, 79. And it's called Madness Absolutely. I should be saying where I've bought some of these records. I live in Southern California now, so I think some of these were bought from Vinyl Solutions in Huntington Beach. This one was bought from Vinyl Surplus in Santa Monica. And I'm not as familiar with this one. I think I've played it once, and it was a long time ago. As I said, these guys are a little bit more radio friendly, a little bit more heading into like the 80s production style. But yeah, this is Madness's second record. Okay, here's a landmark of post-punk, and one of my, I don't have a lot of records that I would say are prize records, or records I think I would put in a vault or something like that, and really worry about what would happen to them if they got caught in a fire or something like that. God forbid, I wouldn't want any of that to happen, but this record I think is pretty cool to have, and this is No New York, which is a compilation album that was released in 1978, along with all of that post-punk stuff. And this was the documentation of the New York no wave movement. And if you're not familiar with no wave, it is sort of a noisier, atonal, less pop-oriented style of post-punk music that kind of came out of the art rock, college, I guess, art community that came out of New York City. It was sort of bucking against the trend of new wave that was kind of being eaten up by major labels, and sort of the fashion-oriented punk styles. This is a lot more kind of nihilistic and noisy, and has absolutely no interest in pop sensibility, and very experimental, and didn't last very long because of that, although it did later sort of spin off into what would become Sonic Youth and Theoretical Girls, which were a little bit more, and Swans, bands that were a little bit more catchy and had some sort of college rock appeal. But here we have a few songs from The Contortions, James Chance and The Contortions, Teenage Jesus and the Jerks, Mars, and DNA, which were sort of the landmarks of the post-punk movement, or specifically the no-wave movement. Here is the second album, Secondhand Daylight, by the band Magazine. They were another sort of famous post-punk band that Howard Devoto started after he left the band, the Buzzcocks, which were sort of a British first-generation pop-punk, power pop sort of band. A little bit more on sort of the Ramones side of thing. This band is a little bit more challenging, starting to use electronics and synths and that kind of stuff, and a little bit more atonal in style, and certainly less catchy and immediate as the Buzzcocks. And this is their second album. Again, probably not the more well-known one. I bought this at Amoeba Records, in their pretty cheap, actually, $7.99, not too bad. I put this on and was listening to it, and this came out in 1979. This is a little gothy, I have to say, in style. I think, this is kind of comparable to like early Bauhaus or Joy Division, and sort of its style and sort of the way that it played out, compared to their first record, which I think is a little bit more well known. But I enjoyed this. It's pretty good. Speaking of Bauhaus, here is Bauhaus's The Sky's Gone Out. I spent a decent amount of money on this, actually. I bought this from Factory Records for $25.99 over in, where is that? Around Irvine, California. This is really good. I mean, all Bauhaus, you pretty much can't go wrong. They were kind of a famous goth band, post-punk band. And this is, sort of midway through their career, I want to say. This probably came out around like 83, 84. But it's really good, and dark music, kind of a little campy. I think there's a little bit more sort of a sense of humor and theatricality that comes with Bauhaus as opposed to the bands that preceded them. And even some of the bands that came after them. I think Bauhaus had a good, mixture of sort of dark lyrics and imagery and that kind of stuff, and playing this sort of droning style of post-punk, but there's a little bit of sort of a motorcycle rockabilly sort of style in there as well, and a little bit of playing up sort of the theatricality and sort of the campiness of the goth movement as a whole. But this is a good record. Here's another one I spent a decent amount of money on. I think this is the first pressing, and not the best condition, but this is the album Cut by The Slits. There you go. These were English punk and post-punk band. I believe this record, this came out in, let's say, 77, 78. And this is an all-girl band, as you can see by the cover. This is actually them. They didn't just use some picture. And they had a really interesting style, very reggae influenced, but not necessarily in a ska kind of way. More sort of reggae in their use of atmospherics and tones and that kind of stuff. It very sparse, angular, scratchy, strange noises that kind of come in and out of the record. A lot of reverb on the vocals and on the bass, sort of a bass-oriented sound. So it has that kind of steady two-tone beat to it, but it plays out a little bit, almost kind of like no wave, but slightly more musical. But this is very experimental and very transitional. I would say somewhat important record within post-punk. Moving up a little bit in the timeline, we have the first record by the band X here, called Los Angeles. They were a Los Angeles band. And these guys are kind of an interesting band. This came out in 1980. And they were popular through the first half of the 80s in Los Angeles, and they were sort of carrying on the tradition of sort of first wave American punk rock. And in a way, we're sort of out of their own time, because by the time we get into the early 80s, you start having hardcore and indie rock and college rock and these kind of things sort of supplanting first generation punk rock, but they were still kind of playing it pretty straightforward. And they were really popular. I mean, as popular as any punk band was at that time. They're featured quite heavily on Penelope Spheeris's movie The Decline of Western Civilization, and they were sort of a trendsetter for Los Angeles punk rock early on, before hardcore. And yeah, Xena, John Doe, they were the two lead singers. They had this interesting kind of male-female call and callback kind of singing style. This is a really, again, another sort of landmark punk rock record that I think sort of bridges a lot of different fan bases within the punk community. You might have some, because of its connection to Decline, you might have some hardcore kids that would buy this record, and then you have some like fashion punks who would buy this record, and you have some new wave people who would buy this record. So they had an interesting sort of niche all their own. Alright, and here I have, this is a bootleg, I think. This is a live show between The Birthday Party and Lydia Lunch. I bought this for $13, Vinyl Solutions. Because it's recorded live and, kind of pressed without the, any kind of real mixing or sound recording that went into it, it sounds like a bootleg. But this is a pretty cool pairing. But Lydia Lunch played in the Teenage Jesus, that was in the No New York record, and The Birthday Party were a post-punk band that came out of Australia, in which Nick Cave of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds was the lead singer. And if you like Nick Cave and you like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds or Grinder Man or some of the stuff he's doing later on in his career, that kind of, piano ballad, mopey, bluesy type of stuff, this is pretty jarringly different. The Birthday Party were pretty noisy, and, they weren't a no-wave band, but they could have easily fit in with that crowd had they come from New York. They also were a little gothy. I think they had quite a bit of a goth following, and Nick Cave certainly rocked the Jim Morrison black hair and leather pants look that was sort of part and parcel with goth. But their music was a lot more challenging, and I think a lot more angular and a little bit more Captain Beefheart inspired than most goth music at that time. So Lydia Lunch kind of fit in with this really well. Like I said, the recording quality of this bootleg is not amazing, because it is a bootleg, but if you can find this one, and I've seen this floating around a lot in Los Angeles record stores, whoever made a bunch of these were selling them out, grab it. It's an interesting artifact. I didn't originally plan on showing this until I just now remembered it, talking about the X record, but I do have the soundtrack, which I have in my soundtrack category over here. I have the soundtrack to The Decline of Western Civilization, the first film in Penelope Spheeris's trilogy, documenting, different rock and punk movements. And this is documenting specifically the early LA punk movement in 1980, so right at the breaking point of hardcore and right at the end of first generation punk and post-punk. So we have here 4 songs from Black Flag, pre-Henry Rollins Black Flag, when he was still in Washington D.C., and I think Ron Reyes was the singer at this point. We have a song from the Germs. This, you see here, that's Darby Crash on the cover, and he's on the cover of the one sheet and the movie DVD if you buy it. And he comes off as, he later would die of a heroin overdose. And you can kind of tell that that's where he was headed based on this documentary. We have X on here, as I mentioned before. A band called Catholic Discipline. They only have one song on here, not particularly well known. Some more X on side 2. Quite a few songs from the Circle Jerks. So this is right after Keith Morris left Black Flag and started Circle Jerks. and the Alice Bag Band, which I think they were probably most well known for being in this movie, or being featured in this movie, and 3 songs from Fear. We're also featured on the soundtrack for SLC Punk, if you've, I Love Living in the City, and these are all live cuts, which kind of makes this a special record to have. They didn't just go into the back catalogs of these bands, grab a few songs and slap them on some vinyl. They actually took the live performances and made a record from those recordings. So this is one to own, and not one that's particularly difficult to find. I've seen it a few times, and it's not too expensive. I bought this for $20 at Pepperland Music in Orange County, California. So there you go. That is my first collection here of punk and post-punk, and the next one of these I think I'm going to start dipping into hardcore and post-hardcore. I have quite a few in that category, so hopefully I'll have some DVD videos up as well here pretty soon. And if you have anything to say about this video, please comment below. Tell me what you think. If you have any of these records, if you have any opinions about these records, that's where to put them. Until then, I'll talk to you later.